This is Just Ask George, exploring the universe of corporate finance and capital formation for your business enterprise, with merchant banker George Lovato Jr. and your host, David Wolf. Welcome back to Just Ask George. David Wolf here, affiliate banker with BH Capital, with the head dude and the one and only notorious George
Lovato
Jr.
And co-dude. And today we have a special guest, the Attorney General of the state of New Mexico and my longstanding friend for, I hate when I say it, okay, at slightly less than 40 years, it really puts the date on me.
You guys go way back.
Because I just had my hair colored to cover all the gray. So.
And of course me, you know about me and hair.
Well, it's hard to imagine George and I as kids, but we were once.
We were once as kids, right? And we were playing golf on Saturday like children.
Yes.
And we were in a tournament for the Democratic Party and having a good time. Gary invited me along, and I hadn't touched a club in 9 months, so we went out there and we actually had a great round. We had fun.
So it was good from a golfing perspective.
Yeah,
yes.
we had fun.
How cool is that? Well, excellent.
Well, 40 years later, and my dad worked for his dad when his dad was governor. He was a two-time appointee, and Dad was continually involved in Bruce's campaigns throughout his political career, and of course, therefore came the connective tissue. Gary was responsible, obviously being involved as a family member in his dad's campaign. That's how we connected way, way, way back. You had just, did you just finish your master's, or were you going into
I was in the
you
middle
were
of
in
getting my
Telluride. You're ready to go to
PhD.
Telluride, or coming back from Telluride.
Correct, but I was in the middle of getting my PhD in organic chemistry at the University of Colorado. I took a leave of absence to work on my dad's campaign back in 1978. So politics was something I was interested in. Actually, my wife was a volunteer. She wasn't my wife then. My wife was a volunteer on the campaign during those days. So I met her in 1978 during that campaign as well too. So
it was something.
Yeah.
It was something. That was he was one of the Gary's is a great candidate. He knows how to run, but his dad is famous for running across scores and scores and scores of people continually and being able to remember their name after not seeing them for. And Gary does. He's got one of those memories.
The recall.
That DNA is in there. You know.
Yep.
He's so lucky. But it would amaze me. And then there'd be these grand parties out at the ranch, and there wouldn't be a person he wouldn't know. And I mean, there'd be 200, 300, 400 people out there.
How amazing. You know? That's so cool.
He was an amazing fellow. He had an amazing memory, but some of that overshadows the fact that he was a great businessman.
Oh,
I mean, the King brothers, very successful enterprises, and a lot of it was because of my dad's business acumen, and it was a sort of that country business acumen. It was, common sense. He had a lot of common sense, and he realized that you got to invest to be successful, and
absolutely.
He taught me a lot of those kinds of things about business. And
Gary's been involved in business since he was born because of one of the largest farming and ranching operations in the state of New Mexico. Was King Brothers, and people forget that farming and ranching is a business.
Sure, that lots of employees and lots of equipment, lots of inventory, and frankly, since you only make your money during 1 or 2 months out of the year, you've got to be able to
manage
know
it.
How to manage.
That's for certain.
We were talking offline before we started rolling, Gary. The subject of innovation came up as we were chatting, as it relates to small business and everything you're thinking about as it relates to small business here in the state of New Mexico. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective, the importance of innovation, also found in farming and agriculture. I know you love that space for that.
Yeah.
Well, I think the key to making New Mexico successful as a business climate, one of those things is innovation. We are a state that has a lot of resources. We have great human resources. We have some natural resources.
That we do.
You all work on the capital resources end, which is actually an issue in New Mexico, I think, a lot of times. But I think for New Mexico to move out of the bottom 10, in economic development categories, we can't just keep doing the same things that we've been doing. We have to be innovative. And I think one of the things I've learned about innovation is that you actually have to be skilled before you can be innovative. And so one of the things that I hope I bring to bear in this debate is that I have a lot of experience in business development. I grew up in a business family, but I was in charge of business development at the United States Department of Energy for a couple of years when I was the head of the Office of Worker and Community Transition, and it was our job to help communities that were being impacted by downsizing of DOE facilities to develop new methodologies, new infrastructure, new training for their workers, and those kinds of things, so that they could weather those kinds of things. And so, I think that that we can bring, some good ideas, some new ideas to the fore on that. I also worked as the in-house lawyer for a New Mexico-based small business called Advanced Sciences Inc. With a fellow named Ed Romero, who was my boss and who's been pretty successful in business as well. And
we worked together on a project over there to refinance that business back in the 90s, and of course, it was always great working with Gary again. But therein lied, the sort of the natural tools in his toolbox, already there, the DNA's already there about business, and I think Ed relied on you a lot, not only for legal advice, but I mean, hey, the how-tos of that business too. That was a very difficult business to manage. A great business, sure, but required a lot of management and a lot of oversight.
Yeah. Well, high tech, you have a lot of scientists and engineers and who are notoriously
sure, they think different, which is part of how that innovation comes in.
Let me ask one question here. Your experience as Attorney General, you've had a lot of contact with small business. Small business turns to your office for guidance and assistance, and so you've had a lot of opportunity to talk with small business. And then how do you intend on, once you're governor, sort of transitioning that same connective tissue that you have with small business again in the governor's office? How do you think that'll happen?
Well, most business people know you have to have a plan. Right? So we're developing a plan to help develop a small business and micro business in New Mexico, because I think those are the bases of our economy in New Mexico.
True.
We can go out and chase the big businesses, and sometimes we'll score on that. My dad was successful when he was governor in helping to recruit Intel into New Mexico, and that's been
that was a big. He recruited quite a few businesses.
He did, and one of the ways that he did that was that he had an interaction with business. I mean, and I think that's point number one in a plan for developing business in New Mexico is to get back where business has an interaction with New Mexico government, and we would want to create a forum where business could meet with government and resolve some of the issues that we have, and I think it's one of the things that's lacking right now is that connection that small businesses have with government. I mean, it's very difficult right now for small business to have any sort of connection.
We did a show just about a year ago on what does a small business do when the natural conduit of capital is closed off. Where do you go? How do you get assistance? And we got a lot of response off that show. And one of the questions was, most frequently asked, was how do you do business with an entity like a state? And in New Mexico, I don't know that there is a forum or a channel to do business. I don't think there's an assistance program for it. I don't believe that any of that exists currently.
Not so much, and I have seen when I was working with Advanced Sciences, we worked in a lot of other states, and I've seen some models that have worked well. In Nevada, they had a model where there was a lot of connection between the state entities, local entities, and business. As new business came in, they would reach out to them and help them with their permitting, with their in all of the business requirements. Here's how our taxes work. Here's somebody from our tax department that can sit down and walk you through the forms that you have to do that. Because one of the things I learned, I had my own small business. It's a law firm.
Still a small business.
I spent 25% of my time just trying to fill out all of the tax forms that I had to do for the different kinds of taxes we had to pay and such. And anything that we could do to help small business to have less red tape and less paperwork that they have to do.
Yep.
And we all have to pay our taxes. I mean, it's not that we're saying you don't.
That's
have
the
to pay
fuel.
Taxes, but I have a friend in business recently who's had difficulty getting his unemployment taxes paid because the computer system with the state, was they just revamped it and apparently didn't test it out before they revamped it, and so a lot of people are having trouble getting their taxes paid online, and then you can't get anybody to help you fix the problem. I mean, you need somebody when you've got a problem who will be responsive and help you deal with the problem.
In terms of developing small business and developing the entrepreneur, what kind of thoughts do you have? And this kind of goes back to innovation as well. What kind of thoughts do you have around that?
Sure. Well, there are programs that have worked well, but I think that we can improve on. New Mexico had a pretty good job training incentive program, and one of my goals would be to develop something that not only encourages business to create new jobs, but to keep people working. And so I think that we can develop a system of incentives that would trigger for businesses that not only hire new workers and train new workers in a new field, but also that commit to keeping them for 3 years, for instance, and so those incentives would pay out over 3 years.
That makes a lot of sense, because one of the programs that was available that I thought was very popular, and in other businesses I had used, was you would get your first 3 months of salary paid by the state of New Mexico as long as somebody was learning a new field, but the incentive was, essentially not to keep the worker. You just kind of turned it over. You got the next 3 months and the next 3 months and the next. But this is a good idea, in that you keep the stabilized worker and the newly educated worker, and you don't provide that benefit. You give them sort of the carrot out there at the end. That makes more sense, and it adds back. And your law firm was a micro business.
Yes.
And most farms and ranches are micro businesses. People don't understand that, and with that idea, that's where you say, hey, if the 10,000, or let's say I think there's approximately 100,000 micro businesses in New Mexico, then if we said 10% of that, or 10,000, added one job.
Yes.
Huge.
That would be the biggest job growth that we've had in New Mexico.
Right, it's huge, and it's just a little. It's a few
It's the micro business,
and
but people don't realize.
Tremendous leverage there.
How many businesses are true micro businesses?
Right.
And I think there's been a lack of focus in our state government. And I actually heard, interesting enough, I saw a speech by Rudy Giuliani recently, and he was talking about leadership. He said, if you're going to be a leader, you got to know where you're going.
Yeah.
And so, I think that if we recognize that we're going to help micro business and small business in New Mexico, and we develop a plan around that we can make it happen.
I noticed that also within the framework of your plan is the idea that big businesses really do need to work with small businesses and vice versa. So there are ways to help stimulate that cross-pollination between large and small, aren't there?
Right, and I think that we also can develop ways to encourage that. But one of the problems that I have people talk to me a lot about is that New Mexico businesses are not being allowed to compete for contracts, within New Mexico or whatever, that we're looking outside the state for people to do things that we have expertise to do inside the state.
You want to insource.
I think that insourcing rather than outsourcing would be a goal for New Mexico.
Insource New Mexico makes a lot more sense than outsource New Mexico, I'll tell
you. So we need to develop incentives that would help larger businesses in New Mexico to contract with and do business.
One of the things that I thought was very innovative was your dad set up sort of a small arm that helped finance some enterprises in New Mexico. And it was a very short period of time. I think there was a project in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I'm not a proponent of having government provide funds. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
They you know, that's a different business, and I think we tried to do it in the film industry, and we you know, softly with tax credits and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But one of the things I'm curious to know is, when it comes to developing business in New Mexico, how can we attract, what do you think we can do to attract capital here? What do you think we can do to attract lending, the institutions? Are there things out there that we could do that could be more proactive? Because I know nothing's being done now.
Sure.
I mean,
well, you know, from a state perspective, I think we have an economic development department, and so one of the goals would be to have a mission plan for them to develop the ideas to do that. And I think that, you know, we're not going to solve all the problems in one day, and if there was a magic wand that we could.
That's why you need 2 terms as governor.
Yeah, well, that's looking way ahead. But I think. For one, government needs to work. Government needs to be effective, and so you know, I'm very results driven in the way that I operate. You know, our agency at the
that can
the
be a
Attorney
key
General's
component
office.
of economic development is
Right.
to go out, is to actually get out there.
Yes.
And create a result around attracting not only big business, small business, and business to business, but also the resources in New Mexico. Because there are, you know, we basically have big banks and regional banks controlling, to a large extent, economic policy in New Mexico. What gets funded, what doesn't, what grows, what doesn't, what stays in business, what doesn't, you know. And I think there needs to be more, and I think that's a great point, economic development. That should be one of their missions.
It should
Absolutely.
be, and they should have targets. You know, if we think that we need to grow the capital part of, you know, that's available in New Mexico, then there need to be people assigned to be working on that. And I think I've had a variety of folks talking to me recently, but the world of capital is changing, and you know that because you're involved in that. But you know, resources can flow in from other states or something like that through electronic means now. I mean, you don't have to have a brick and mortar building in New Mexico probably anymore to provide that kind of financing or something, which was a problem maybe 20, 30 years ago. But now there are opportunities. And so, you know, as Attorney General, part of our goal is to, we do some regulation of the industry, but you need regulations that for one, stay the same for a period of time, so the business knows that they can count on the fact that the state's not going to change. You know what they're doing every 6 months.
And you don't want to attract predatory lenders. You don't want to. You know, obviously you've got to guard against that as AG. The other issue is, you know, there has to be a body of rules around what they can and can't do and the types of products they offer, because, you know, desperate people sometimes do desperate things. Small businessmen have had the door locked on them now since 2007.
Yes.
And, you know, we got to bring the right kind of institution into New Mexico, the right type of product, so to speak, to help that micro and small business.
And the AG's office has been particularly interested in stopping predatory lending because we don't think that helps. But one of the things that I have found, as we are dealing with some nefarious, you know, payday lenders, and not everybody is. I mean, so we try and deal with the bad actors. We don't try and deal with everybody. So I'm not saying that everybody's a bad actor. But one of the things that I have found is that if you are in need of, say, $1,000, if you're a micro business, and or say even $10,000 that you can invest to grow your business, if the only place that you can go is to some sort of predatory lending practice, then maybe, you know, you'll be enticed to do that anyway. What the state needs to develop a program to encourage lending to those small needs, you know, the microloans or whatever.
It's almost like the size is driving the where they go.
Well, and actually there are programs that have worked in microloans that, you know, that have worked in Africa and in
India,
you know, in India and other places where they want to encourage small business. We ought to look and see if any of those kinds of ideas would work in New Mexico.
That's a great
I think
idea.
That there might be ways to,
because a micro business is truly a micro borrower. You know,
absolutely, their capital needs are scaled accordingly. Right?
Exactly. We've talked about that on several occasions, where that's sort of an ignored marketplace by and large. And I'm glad to see that you've incorporated the word micro business into your lexicon, because people really don't understand what that is. They just, you know, oh gee, I just opened my computer. I've opened a website and I'm now in business, and it's me. I'm my sole employee, and they really are a micro business. I mean, their needs, wants, and desires, and their capacities are so much different than the guy that's got 10 employees.
Well, and by category, Advanced Sciences, the company I worked for, was a small business.
Was a small
but they had
business.
about 500 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there aren't that many businesses in New Mexico that have 500 employees. There are a lot of businesses
True.
in New Mexico that have 3 or 4 employees.
There you go.
or
Exactly.
10 or 20, and we need to focus on that.
You know, it's good that you have business in your DNA. You've got business in your experience. What do you think you'll do in sort of round figures and very broad brushstrokes to maintain your connection to small business in New Mexico?
Well, I think one of the most important things would be to develop what my dad did, an advisory group,
Council,
a group
yeah.
of top business leaders who you meet with and have lunch with once a month and say, you know, what's going on, and let me know, because it's hard for a governor, especially if they don't reach out. You know, if you can get surrounded by your minions, I think, and think that you're doing a great job. I mean, you need to reach out to the business.
Way to go,
community,
Gov.
so.
Way to go, Gov. That's all you hear all day long. Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, I think that it's important to reach out. We have great business experience in New Mexico. We have some great business leaders in New Mexico, and they need to have access to the governor, and you know, to be able to sit down.
Information is really one of the keys, that you have to maintain that sort of that connection to the pulse of business. And I like that idea that, you know, there was a thinking, it was the 10 by 10 rule. You got 10 people to feed one source information, and each one of those 10 had 10, and then they had another, each one of those 10 had 10 by 10, so that you really had this very vast network of people out there feeding information. And, you know, the fear was, okay, well, you get 5 guys in a circle, and one guy says, my bowling ball is black. And by the time it goes around, you know, he's got a black bowling bag, you know, as opposed to the bowling ball. And so, but one of the ideas was the clarity that was kept in that 10 by 10 rule in the business environment. People, you know, generally wanted to keep it accurate and keep it clean and keep it. So I think that, you know, small group, larger group, larger group, larger, you know, larger network of people.
But I have found that business in New Mexico feels like they have not had access to, you know, if they think that the government is not doing a good job, or even if they think they are, that they haven't had the access that they need to have that input,
Right.
to let the governor or government agencies know what's going on. So it would be, I learned that from my dad. He had an open door policy. I mean, but he also reached out to people that were experts and said, let's do that.
It was interesting, and you know, I don't want to take a negative approach on this subject matter, but this is really something that needs to be focused on. You know, business has to have access to government.
Yes.
Okay, end of story. And I remember a candidate walking in here for governor, and she made the comment, you know, my door is always open to small business, and yet in the past few years, there's been no communication. And I can tell you, hundreds of my friends, family, and colleagues can verify that. And I think that and I don't know of a plan in place. And I think that this is one of my key ideas that I think needs attention is access. If business knows what government's doing and government knows what business is doing, you know, to me it's a good formula.
And you have to have standards. I mean, if we know over the last 2 years or 3 years that we've been going the wrong direction. I mean, we are last in job growth. We're last in being a good place to raise your children. We're last in you know, the number of people that are in poverty in the state. And so I think that you have to set standards and say, all right, next year we're going to be better. And next
We
year
got to
we're gonna be
improve our
better.
metrics.
and
You
Yeah.
have to improve, and so, but you have to have a plan. And one of the things we haven't talked about is bringing in our institutions of higher education. We have great institutions of higher education in New Mexico. My wife actually, while she was getting her PhD in chemistry at the University of New Mexico, was working out at the Air Force Research Laboratory, and so she ended up getting a job out there because that was, you know, she got a
Wow.
PhD there. She worked there. I mean, we don't do nearly enough to give our students in universities the opportunity to go out and work or intern with business. Now, in her case, it was with the Air Force, but I think that there would be lots of opportunities if we would work at them for companies in New Mexico to have internships or ways that they could work so that you can gain some credit and gain some business experience.
That's entrepreneurial development.
Absolutely.
That's really adding longevity to, you know, we've made an investment with our our institutions of higher education in these students, and what a way to maximize that investment, that return, by keeping them here. As opposed, you know, it's sort of like we always say in sports, you know, we get these kids from Hobbs and Gadsden and all of these small schools, and they wound up getting recruited by, you know, Ole Miss and Ohio State and so on, you know, and we go, there goes our talent for our football team.
Right, right.
Well, it's the same thing here.
Sure.
You know, it's the same thing with the mines of New Mexico that we're actually fertilizing in these colleges and universities.
Particularly in the last few years, there's been a flight of good talent from New Mexico to other states in business. I mean, we're losing doctors, we're losing lawyers, we're losing engineers, we're losing all those. And I, you know, just to get back to that, because it reminded me, I mean, we have had tax policy in New Mexico that doesn't encourage the development of high-tech kind of businesses. I mean, the way that we apply our gross receipts tax to services, you know, it's because engineering firms have, you know, a disadvantage if they site in New Mexico versus if they site somewhere around us or whatever. And lots of businesses can do a lot of their business over the internet now, so they can site wherever they want to site, and then you know, you can transfer information, you can do all those things. So we need to develop infrastructure, and so.
All right.
This is these are the seeds of a business plan for New Mexico.
I love it.
I like it. I like it.
Well, we may have to talk about it more later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's
Let's keep the forum open and have Gary back as it develops. And I think it's good. You know, we've got an international audience out there. We appreciate you watching, and we're over 3 million views
here on Just Ask George, and we appreciate you watching and continuing to watch.
Yeah, I think this is something that Gary's business plan is something that maybe other governments can start to look, listen, and watch on. And I think it's important for our New Mexico viewers to have access to this information. I'm glad you came on.
Thanks, Gary.
You know, we've been talking about this for a while.
Great to have you.
My back is killing me from Saturday. I'll tell you, my hands were tired, and I wasn't moving swiftly on Sunday. That's
you can tell that George and I don't spend all of our time playing golf.
There it is.
That's right.
All right. Well, great. So for the next hole, you'll watch it for us once again on Just Ask George, www.bhcapitalltd.com. George,
great show, bud.
We'll see you next time.
One more time.
Gary, thanks again. Yeah, man. All right. We'll
Take
see you
care.
next time.
Bye bye.
For more information about George Lovato Jr. and BH Capital, visit bhcapitalltd.com. Check out more episodes of Just Ask George at justaskgeorgeradio.com. Just Ask George is produced by Steve Garth and is a production of BH Capital Ltd. All rights reserved.